Another one for me is just practicing gratitude. Whether I wake up and I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, or I praying that just being grateful, not necessarily having to have a script to the way it goes down, but just being able to recognize and think about the things that I'm thankful for in life. I think that really the way to remove the distractions and get out of the minutia is to have that clarity on, you've got to have, I think that I refer to Elon Musk a lot, and in Elon, I always tell our guys is like, what's your Mars, right?
Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me, brother.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspectives, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. Now, as CEO of Columbus Roofing Company, host of the Reckless CEO podcast, what does peak performance mean to you?
I think peak performance to me is the clarity and the focus, the mission, right? Peak performance, I think whether it's in fitness or it's in business, you've got to have the clarity and the direction of where you're going in order to be at the highest level, right? Because if we don't have something, I think, that's pushing us to that next level, or we have that vision of where we want to go, we never actually hit that peak mode, right? If you're not excited, if you're not driven or have purpose and reason behind the thing you're doing, you're not going to get into that peak performance mode versus being able to be super clear on what you want to do and where you're going. And I think that's the one way that you can really achieve that peak performance.
Most people will say that they just have a hard time balancing out the minutiae of day in, day out grind. So how can one work on themselves so that they are able to be in that excited state of mind to achieve that peak performance in whatever they're doing?
Yeah, I would say that one of it is that it's more of a reduction, right? I think we think that more is better. And the more that I've done in business and the more that I've grown, I've always gotten to the next level by doing less, removing the commitments, removing the expectations, removing the attachments to all the things that, we overcommit to. I think people want to be an investor in this, and they want to have the 7 streams of income, and they want to go to all these different directions. And that's what gets so distracting. That's what creates so much minutiae, is that you're putting so much pressure to uphold this commitment to all these different things that you're doing. And I think that really the way to remove the distractions and get out of the minutia is to have that clarity on, you've got to have, I think that I refer to Elon Musk a lot, and in Elon, I always tell our guys is like, what's your Mars? Right? Elon, everything he's doing is directed towards getting humanity to Mars, right? And whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Tesla, right? All of these things, he's not saying he wants to go to Mars and Pluto and there and the sun. And no, he's got one mission, and everything he's doing is revolving around that. And when we're not super clear on what the end result is or where we really want to go, then we allow our human needs, right? Significance, contribution, growth, all these things that we don't realize are drivers for us. We let that control our emotions and decisions we make.
Can you give an example of a time in your life where you had to take a machete and go through this reduction effort that you talked about? What was in the way, and then how did you determine what to take out, and then what happened afterwards?
Yeah, I could, for me, when I first got into business, I think I wanted to start a business because I wanted to be an influencer, and I wanted people to know me, and I cared more about opinions of other people than I really did for myself, right? It's like I have done a lot of self-development and really reflecting on myself, and realized for me that significance is such a driver, right? I love to feel significant. I want to feel needed. I want to feel like a leader. I want people to look up to me. And sometimes that the desire for significance led me into committing to things that didn't really suit me. But in the moment, it sounded great because it triggered that response. It triggered that emotion that I can do that. Yeah, you need help with this. You guys are going to rely on me for this thing. And I would just take on all these things. And so when I started Columbus Roofing Company, like I said, I wanted to have the podcast, and I wanted to have a roofing business, and I wanted to have a coaching and consulting arm, and I wanted to have a media company, and I wanted to be a real estate investor. And it was like all of these things that I had made me feel significant. They made me feel important, because it was like, oh, everyone, if anyone asks me what I do, I can give them this laundry list of stuff. Because to me, like, it was just triggering that, versus where I'm at now, I care less about what people think, right? I want to obviously have a good light, and I want people to think of me as a good human, but it's not about impressing anybody. It's about me striving and progressing to be the best version of myself. And even over the last 2 years, it was getting out of business relationships, getting out of personal relationships, right? Getting out of the things that aren't serving me, right? The things that aren't going to get me to my Mars, I had to start to remove those things, or I had to be honest with myself that you don't really want the thing you say you want as much as you do if you're willing to have all of these other things that are distracting you from that.
Having that mindset, having that positive mindset, what's a challenge that you have faced in maintaining this positive mindset as an entrepreneur? Because sometimes we can get there initially, but it's so hard to consistently stay on it.
Yeah, I think that you're a fitness guy, right? I think that one of the most important things is you've got to have a structure. Structure is obviously extremely important, right? I think as humans, we don't think we want structure. We don't think we want discipline or accountability, but we thrive to have it. So for me, one of the biggest things is just being able to have a daily structure, right? Have those non-negotiables that it's like, hey, no matter what, I'm going to do these things. So I think that so much really derives around certainty, especially in today. It's you've got cold plunge and you've got all of these different things that the media is saying that this is going to get you, this is going to make you elite, this is going to make you a top CEO. And I think that all these things have the potential to make you better. But I think one of the biggest things with it is that it really just provides certainty. Right. And so I tell guys all the time, I don't care if waking up and making your bed and chugging a hot cup of coffee makes you certain to go into the day, then that needs to be the thing that you do consistently, because everything's about tricking the mind. Right. We underestimate how powerful our mind is. And so when you can find the things that give you that certainty, right, then now you've got your secret sauce. So for me, I know that I love to be consuming knowledge. For me, the more that I can be in consuming other people's knowledge and being that ultra perspective, the more that I can listen to podcasts and read books and get different inputs, it gets me out of my own head. It gets me consuming that things that other people are saying so that I can start to, I think when we're not learning and listening and growing, then we get stagnant and we get complacent and we start believing ourselves and living our lives through the reality that we're creating in our head.
What are some of these specific habits that you have in your routine? What are some practices that you utilize that has become instrumental in your success?
For me, I think the gym is an extremely important one, right? I was telling you, I used to bodybuild, and for that, I played hockey. And so I've always had a fitness component to me my entire life. And I think that's something that, has really kept me locked in. And it's not so much about when you're competing for a show, you've got that kind of destination, you've got something to push for. But I've seen a lot of people compete for a show and do great. You see them dialed in and they're focused, and then the show's done and they just fall back into the routine. And so for me, it's the fitness side has always been just instrumental to my growth, because it's that daily check the list, right? It's like I get in and I don't necessarily have to be in there growing. I'm just maintaining. But I know that getting in there every morning for me, I go to the gym, I walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes. I put Audible book on. I listen to my Audible book for 30 minutes. And then once I jump off that, I'll put some music on and then I work out. So fitness is a huge side for me because I just think it makes you feel good. Another part of me is meditation, right? It's one of those things where it's simple. It's not easy, right? You get moving, you get going, and it's really easy to not do it. But having that as something that I can tell myself, I got to do it 3 days this week. But I think sometimes we overcommit. Right. Where people wanting to get in shape and they go from never being in shape to then trying to work out for 7 days straight, and then they burn out. Right. We underestimate what we can achieve in a year, but we overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 10. Right. And so it's that idea of stop shooting for the fences all the time and just build these things that are going to allow you to be consistent. Another one for me is just practicing gratitude. Whether I wake up and I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, or I praying that just being grateful, not necessarily having to have a script to the way it goes down, but just being able to recognize and think about the things that I'm thankful for in life, because I think that gratitude is one of the highest ways that you can calibrate as a human. And so the more that you can allow yourself to pull back and just realize that, stop living in that gap. Dan Sullivan has a book. It's called The Gap in the Game. And what he talks about in there is the idea that how many of us live in that gap. We're looking at this destination and where we want to go. And we're so focused on how far we've got to go versus looking at the gain and thinking like how far I get to go, or looking back and thinking how far I've come. So for me, so much of it is about this mental game and being able to do these couple things that keep me dialed in. And then I also think it's cleanliness, right? It's simple, right? Keeping the house clean. It's like the more that you allow things around you to be distractions and things like that, it just gets you off. So you've got to be able to stay focused and stay clear-headed.
Sometimes in life, we have the best intentions, we have the best plan, but things don't go the way we want it to go. How do you go about handling setbacks? And what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are facing tough times?
Yeah, it's cliche, right? Of course, but it's the idea that things happen for you, not to you, right? I can look back at everything that I'd faced that was adversity or it was something that I felt like I was never going to get through and realize that every single one of those situations has made me better. And in the moment, it's hard to do that, right? Because it's really easy to sit here and say, oh, I look back and it would all made sense now. Right. But when you're going through it, it doesn't make sense. And I think for me, I think one of the best ways to navigate that is you've got to have good people around you, and you've got to be vulnerable and willing to share with people. I think that I come from a pretty blue collar background. And so for me, being vulnerable and being weak was and honest was a weakness. And as I grew in business, when things were tough and I didn't have a lot of people around me versus going and having a conversation with a mentor who could give me direction and some guidance. And for me, the people that are the most successful in my life, they want to help you. They know what it's like to be there and they want to share that. And so if you're going through challenging times, being proactive to potential challenging times, is you got to get good people around you that are going to be able to give you feedback and being willing to share with them and have these conversations and know that you don't have to be alone. We choose to be alone sometimes because that's our self-pity, right? That sometimes we want to sit in it because it makes us feel good versus being able to get uncomfortable and have that conversation with somebody about really what's going on.
What inspired you to start Columbus Roofing Company?
I would say that when I started, it was more out of necessity. I had been getting into real estate investing and trying some different things. And I had a partnership that kind of went south and ended up in a position where everything that I had was in this kind of real estate portfolio. And I was just in a bad position. And just like you're saying, a challenging time. And I had a conversation with a mentor and just told him, I'm like, man, I'm spiraling, dude. I feel like everything I've been working on, everything I've been doing is going to crash, right? And so much of my ego wanted to hold on to the thing that I was, or the way that I was being seen by anybody else. Right? I didn't want to say, oh man, I failed at this, it didn't work out. Right? I wanted to just stick through it and grind. I was ready to go down with it. And had a conversation with him, and he literally said, "You should start a roofing company." And I always give the joke of like, "Why would I start a roof? Like, I'm too pretty for roofing, man. Why would I do that?" And he's, "Yeah, man, it's a sales and marketing business. Really, he's like the way that your ability to build people and your want to build people and just the skill sets that you have. I think that they would align very well in that industry. And then on top of that, Mike, he said, you don't really have an option. Like, you've got to do something that's going to get you paid right now, unless you're going to go take a job. And he said, you've got to find something that's a big ticket that you can sell and that you can close quickly. And roofing happened to be the thing that he had consulted and had a little bit of background in it. So he was able to give me a little guidance on it. I wish I had a reason other than, oh man, I wanted to do this big thing. But really at the time, I had to figure out a way to get income, and roofing happened to be the thing that made sense.
A lot of times that's the secret to success, is doubling down on what we are good at. But instead we are told that follow your passion. And then people are confused forever what their passion is, because people's passion changes. So your story is really an example of a real life example of how that quote works. Your journey is also a story of adaptability, being adaptable to difficult times. How do you cultivate this in your team now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Mark. I think that adaptability is one of those things that it can be difficult to train, right? Because I think adaptability happens by sometimes just the way that we were brought up, right? For me growing up, I had to just figure things out a lot of times, and I had to adapt. And when I came to Columbus, I didn't have a lot of family or friends or any real set plan. And so I had to be adaptable. Now, I think that you can train that by the values that you instill into your business, right? One of our core values is innovative, right? And I think that it really encapsulates adaptability as well, right? Like, you've got to be willing to look at a problem and be solution oriented and find a way to navigate around it, and not just, there's a big difference between wanting an answer and seeking an answer. Right. And I think that when you can seek an answer and put effort into learning something and figuring it out, that you're going to get what you need out of it, versus just saying, help me with this and solve it for me, because you're not really growing from that. Right. It's like, great mentors aren't always going to give you the answer. They're going to influence your thought. They're going to help you discover that answer by yourself. And so for me, it really starts with your ability to build an organization around values and belief systems that you're consistently just instilling in your team and everybody around you.
Stoic philosophy is something that inspires you.
Yeah.
So how do you incorporate those principles into your your daily life and leadership style?
Yeah, when I think of stoicism at its core, is you look at Marcus Aurelius and he says that I believe it's your circle of power, right? And your circle of power is what you can control. Right? And he says, what can you control? You can control how you show up, you can control how you think, and you can control how you treat people, right? As simple as you can make it, that's really the only things that you have control of. And so I think so much about building an organization that resonates that is you've got to be a proactive leader. I think a lot of times as we're growing a business, we're very reactive. We're growing it. We're trying to figure stuff out. We don't know the answers and you become and we allow ourselves to say, I just don't know. That's why we're reactive. And it's no, you cannot know and still be proactive because you can be training the people to learn. You can be coaching the people, right? For us, every Friday, I do a company-wide meeting, right? I just run it on Zoom. Anybody can join in the organization that feels like it. And I'm just going in and I'm teaching or coaching or Q&A and just like constantly trying to educate my people, right? I think the best way to learn anything is to learn it, is then to do it, and then to teach it. And so that's a big philosophy in our organization. And then I'm encouraging our leaders to do the same thing, forcing them out of their comfort zones and forcing them to progress themselves and then being able to teach others how to do the same thing.
It's one thing to be able to be really good at something and take it to the maximum level you can. And then to go to the next level, you have to hire people. And when you are leading teams, that becomes a whole different beast. So what do you do to empower your team to take ownership of what they're doing? Because sometimes getting employees to take ownership of things is difficult.
It is. And I think that as entrepreneurs, you hear, especially the founder situation, right? You hear a lot of people like, oh, you got to give up control. And I don't think that it's as much about control as it is trust. And so the trust factor is this idea that I heard I had a conversation with, they said that it's not a control thing, it's a trust thing. They said, think about you're building, you're sculpting a pot and you finally got this pot, it's made and you put all this time and effort into it. And then you give it to somebody and they drop it. And then you put it back together and you give it to somebody else and they drop it. And then you're putting it back together. And all these times you're getting these scars and from picking it up and picking up the pieces and putting it back together that you just start to struggle with trusting people. Because I think as entrepreneurs, like we want to give up control. I know that I do. I don't want to have all that risk and all that stress and accountability all on me. I want to give up that control. But I also I also struggle to trust the fact that I know that the person that I'm handing it to is going to treat it the same way that I did because it's not theirs. They didn't build it. And so I think the best way to empower your leaders is what I've done in our organization is that each department, I create my framework to say, here's what I want. I have like a CEO playbook. And what it is I'll go through, this is our 10-year vision, right? Here's where we're going to be in 10 years. Here's where my expectation is. This is what I want. Then I'll break it down by department and say, I want our marketing to look like this. And I want us to market into these channels. And I want our message to feel like this. And I want to talk to these people. And here's our ideal client. And I'll go into sales. And here's how I want our salespeople to show up. And here's how I want our customers to feel. And here's the experience that I want them to have. And I'll go through all of these departments and really break down what my vision is. Right. And then I give that to my leaders and allow them. I don't give it to them and say, here's how you're going to do it. I give it to them and say, hey, this is my vision for it. Now you build it, right? You build it and you bring it back to me and let me help you build it. But so often we want to build it and then we want to tell them how to do it. And if you build it and you tell them how to do it, they got no ownership in it. It wasn't their idea, right? So you've got to allow people to feel empowered, not just force them to be empowered. So when you can create that vision and then give them the opportunity to make it theirs with you, I think that creates a lot of empowerment.
Can you share an example of a time maybe when your leadership was tested and how you overcame that challenge?
Yeah. So I would say there's a lot of them. That's the thing, right? There's so many of them, man. I think that in the beginning of starting our business, it was our first year and we had a great season. We had a storm that hit and all of this stuff happened. And we went from our best month was 90,000. And then we went straight to the next month being 500. It broke the business. I look back and I'm like, I don't think we made any money that year because it was just so insane. I'm trying to figure it all out. And I was showing up and I was being a leader and I was helping. And then at the end of and as we were expanding and growing so fast, I didn't even know how to pay everybody. There was all of these things. And I was living off credit cards and just paying employees and giving people extra commission and doing all these things to make sure I could keep the people. And then right at the end of the season, right before it got cold out, one of my guys called me one night and he said, hey, Mike, I just wanted to give you a heads up. This other roofing company company has reached out to every one of us, and quite a few of us, if not all of us, have met with them. And he offered us a sign-on bonus to leave. He offered each of us extra money if we can get every other employee from your company to come in. And I don't know what I'm going to do, Mike, but at the end of the day, it is a money thing. And that's what this is. That's why we work. We love you. We all want to make more money. And this is after I gave him everything, Mark. Like I said, I sacrificed a relationship for it. Everything that I could. It was like I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand like how they could have even have done that. Right. I'm like, man, I felt abandoned. I felt taken advantage of. And in that moment, I had called a mentor, and I'm just like, bro, this whole business is going to collapse as fast as we had successes. We're going to crash even faster. And then the slow season comes, and all of a sudden we've got all this debt that we owed, that the operator that I had in place hadn't paid yet, and all of this stuff. And it was like, I felt like I was on top of the world. And then all of a sudden it was like I was left with nobody, and I had no one else around me. I had maybe one or two other people that ended up staying. A bunch of them left, and I had nothing to show for it. I had a good year in business, and I had no money. I lost my fiance, and I had nothing. And we're going into the next season, and we had a big debt bill that we had to pay down. And in that moment, I had 2 or 3 people that were still with me. And I sat them down at a table, and I was just vulnerable and honest. And I'm like, listen, we're going to, like, this thing's, it's not going to exist unless we do something. And I said, and all I can think about doing is we got these customers that owe us money, all of this stuff. And I'm going to start calling these people. I'm going to start collecting these checks. I'll drive 2 hours away. I'll do whatever I can. And so for me, that was a moment where, everything that I've always felt, that your business was like this family. And I realized that your business is like a team, right? Family implies it's forever. Family implies it's blood, right? A team isn't that, right? A team is a team that understands that every single person is here and is responsible for being the best version of themselves and doing everything that they can, and understanding that if they aren't doing that, they have the ability to be replaced just as fast. And so going into that next season, for me, it was the ability to lead by example, and ability to know that no matter what, even if you give people everything, doesn't mean they're going to stay. It doesn't mean they're going to appreciate you. And so as a business owner, I learned that one is lead by example, and the other one is to be able to create the values and the beliefs, like just like I told you, like the culture and all of these things. That you have to get super, super clear on, does this person fit or does this person not? Because a great culture will repel and a great culture will attract. Right. And at the end of the day, when you can build a culture that resonates how it is, like, you automatically will only start to get the right people in your business. Right. Because in the beginning, I'd hire for a pulse. Right. If you were willing to knock doors and you were willing to do what it took, I'd hire you. But all that got me was a bunch of people gone. Right. Now I've learned that it's not. And I think too, when you start a business, like, you're selling everybody on your business, right? Like, you have to sell. Hey, you got to build the vision. You got to tell them how great it's going to be. You got to tell them about their opportunity. And I think as entrepreneurs, we get caught up in that sometimes, right? Because we had to sell because we were so desperate for just someone to see that vision and jump on with us. Where you get to the other side of it and you realize that you're the value, you're the idea, you're the vision. Like, you've built this thing. Make people sell themselves on why they should even be able to join your team. And so for me, a lot of that was the example and understanding that you got to be patient and wait for the right people. And if they're not the right people, don't even allow it to come in, and because it'll crash your culture as fast as it can build one.
What are some other common pitfalls that you think service-based owners should specifically look out for?
I think that a huge one is quality at scale, right? We want more, right? We want more. We want to be doing more roofs. We want to be building more homes, whatever it is. And so we get caught up on the more, right? Versus I want to maintain a quality. I want to maintain customer experience. And I think in service space, especially, that there's a lot of technicians in the service space, right? And a lot of people that start a business in the service space started it because they were actually doing it. And then they just started to build a business around it. And so it's that can be their bottleneck, that they hold on and have an ego around, this is my business. I can do it better than anybody. You've got to be able to remove yourself from that technician mindset, and you've got to start to look at it from a business mindset. So I think that in order to grow and build a business, you have to be focused on quality all the time. Like that meeting that I just had before we came here, that was a conversation I had with my team. I said, listen, we're going into next season. This is going to be the biggest year we've ever had. Right? You core, everybody in this room, I brought you here today because you're the ceiling. You're the example. You're the ones that everyone's going to look at when they come in. And so if we're not communicating, if we're not working together, if we're not setting that bar, then we're only hurting ourselves. And if you don't think that you have the ability or the want to, then this is probably a good time for you to leave at the same time, right? So I think quality, and then as the owner standpoint, making sure that you're not allowing the ego around being the best technician hold you back. And then too, it's just like we said, we want to expand into everything. Right. I had an acquisition this year that I probably went through for about six months on buying a window company, because in my mind, it made sense. Right. But when I brought him in, I realized how crucial that first 90 days was. But then I held on to it because I made a commitment to it, because I wanted to be able to be the company that could do all of these things. But at the end of the day, you need to, what can you be the greatest in your industry at? That's what you need to focus on. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing, and focus on how can we be the best at this one thing, and then allow that to scale and grow you. But so often we want to try to service everything. And especially as a sales guy, right? It's, oh, I can do that. Oh yeah, we can do that too. Oh, and we can also do that. And you allow yourself to please somebody versus saying, but no, we can't do that. And I think that comes down to even your ideal client, right? Getting super clear on who is your ideal client, and just making and saying no to the things that aren't that. Because it's really easy to, yes, the next thing you're like I talked about in the beginning, right? You're overcommitted, you're overextended, and now all of a sudden your business looks nothing like the way you envisioned it to.
You wrote a book, Reckless to Riches. What are some practical tools that you emphasize to entrepreneurs about gaining freedom, quitting their 9 to 5, and building wealth?
Yeah, so, and I appreciate the plug on that. It'll actually should be out by the end of the month. I'm going through some revisions on it right now and just making sure that everything's where I want it to be. But inside of that, really I would say the key concept to that is it starts from the beginning, right? Of recruiting top talent, right? Educating them, right? It's building a culture around them. It's keeping them, right? How do you keep top talent, right? It's building leadership. Right. And then you just go through, really, it's about being able to go through all these steps so that you're able to start to replicate yourself. And that's one of the hardest things to do as we're building this business. Like, we can't be the one to solve all the problems. We can't be the one to sell every job. And the only way for us to make sure that the business or the culture continues to feel like us, even when we're not doing all of these things or maybe over these things, is your ability to instill those values, instill the culture, educate those people, and be diligent on making sure that you're building a process that replicates you, right? Because you got to replicate you, and then you got to automate you, right? Delegate it, right? You go through these steps where you have to be able to create something that feels like you. I hear business owners all the time talk about, I can't find good people, or they can't sell it like I can. They can't do it the way that I do it. And that's such a cop out, because it's that if your people can't replicate the way that you do it, then you're not teaching them how to do it. And it's impossible for you to be the one to be over top of every single thing. And so it's so crucial that from the start of bringing somebody in, that progression and that success plan that you're building for them, one, you have to map it out for people, because people need to see it. Right. It's really easy to blow smoke and say, hey, here's what you can do. You can make 6 figures if you come in and work for us. But but how are they going to get there? We need to break it down into these daily tasks. And the way to really scale and build a great business is to make sure that you're creating something that is educating and building up within, not some of the businesses that become the most successful. You look at the GEs and the Intels and all of these large Johnson & Johnson, all of these large companies, they get to where they're at because they build a great system that builds leaders within and constantly builds that. You look at Jack Welch, right? He was at GE for, I think, 10 or 15 years before he became the CEO, right? He started at the ground floor and worked his way up. And I think every business owner should strive to have a process that creates great leaders inside of it, not finds them.
You're also the host of the Reckless CEO podcast. What gap did you notice in the leadership in the business podcasting world that you thought, you know what, I'm going to create a podcast to fill those gaps in?
I think one of the biggest gaps, man, is just not being honest. I think people are scared to tell the truth of what it feels like, to tell the truth of what's actually happening. Right. On my podcast, I'll share about the months where, we're 3 days out from payroll and we got 80 grand going out. We got 10 grand in the bank account, right? We falsify what actually entrepreneurship can be. And that is really my goal with the podcast, is I want to bring on guests. And then I personally want to share the real stuff, because I think that sometimes we set new entrepreneurs up for failure by not actually being honest about what it takes. It's like we get so caught, it's so fixated on making it look easy that people think it's easy. And it's not easy. right? 90 some percent of businesses fail. They never succeed. They don't even surpass $1 million in a year. This game is not easy. It's hard. It takes a certain type of individual. It takes resilience. It takes adaptability. It takes leadership. It takes failure. You know what I mean? And I think that that was my biggest thing with it, is that there's so many podcasts out there that they're just telling people what they want to hear, not telling them the truth.
Have a business, you run a team, you also run a podcast, you're also writing books. Somehow, you also find the time to be the president of Foster the Future. So what motivates you to support foster youth, and how does this work align with your entrepreneurial values?
First, Mark, I appreciate you doing your deep dive. So thank you for bringing these things up, because I love to talk about it, man. And for me, foster teens, I didn't grow up in a foster agency. I wasn't ever exposed to that. Now, my family had its struggles and things like that. And fortunately enough, I was able to continue to grow and build and become who I am today. But for me, as I Foster the Future really stemmed from when I started getting into entrepreneurship. I started throwing events, and then we would donate stuff to youth advocate services and all these different ways to just give back to the community. And then I was working with a friend of mine who's a pastor, and at their church, they started to raise money for, or allow people to buy gift cards to donate to the church. And then they would buy foster teens, they'd give them gift cards, right? Because their idea was that when you look at foster kids, and the holidays come, right? So that foster kids get presents still, and they get these things, and foster teens get reality. It becomes apparent that they might be 2 months out or 3 months out from getting put on the street. And there's a few programs out there that give mild support, but it's sad that the system that's supposed to support them is a system that fails them. And I had the opportunity to have a mentor that spoke, like I was telling you, tell me to start a roofing company. And this individual was probably the only person at this time that saw a version of me that I didn't see for myself. And by him seeing that and speaking that into me, he made me believe it. And it changed my life. And I got a team now of 40 some people, and I'm changing their lives, and I'm helping them change other people's lives. And I see how one conversation, one person can change somebody's life and change a lot of lives around them. And as I was working with the church and seeing the way that was going, and Columbus Roofing Company was growing, and I'm seeing these guys come in as 18-year-old boys, and by the time they're 20, 21, 22, they're men. And I wasn't like that at 21, 22. And so watching this transition for them, it was just like this aha, wait a second, maybe there's an opportunity here. And so that's really what kind of stemmed Foster the Future, was that my goal with it is to eventually turn it into a non-traditional education system. I want to have a campus, right? And leveraging that campus as like CRC University, right? Where I'm building entrepreneurs or building salespeople coming in and getting educated in entrepreneurship and all of these things to be able to be a feeder system into our company. But then likewise, being able to help the foster teens, give them an opportunity to step into something and be coached and be trained and learn and have somebody just believe in them. Because I think that once you're exposed, you can't be unexposed. And so many people just never get that exposure. They don't even for us, is when I got into this, I didn't understand how big this could be. I wanted it, but I wasn't able to materialize it until I got around people that have billion-dollar companies and multi-million-dollar companies. And I'm like, wait a second, like, they're human. They're not that much different than me. I'm sitting down having a conversation with them, and know anything that I don't know, right? They have experience. There's nothing about them that I couldn't become. And so the more that I was able to get around that, the more my business has grown, the better off that we've done. And so, sorry about that, my camera went all crazy on me. And so that's what stemmed Foster the Future, was that it really was, for me, in a selfish way, was my opportunity to help a culture that needs help, right? And really what started to happen was that I had an event, and our goal was there was 150 foster teens directly in Columbus, Ohio. And my goal was to buy them all suitcases and stock it with materials and all of these things for them, school supplies and stuff like that. Then I started connecting with the city, and I had the money, I had the resources, and it was almost impossible to get it to the kids. So I started connecting with some outside agencies and was telling them, like, hey, here's my vision. This is what I want to do. And one guy tells me, hey man, like, I'm going to be honest with you, those kids will never get that. Those kids will never get those resources, because the system and the chain of command to get it to anybody, it's nearly impossible. You can buy all these things and you can take them somewhere and they'll probably sit in the closet and they might get distributed. And so as I learned that and heard that, it was like, this is crazy. Like, I got to do something. I got to change this. Right. And so, as an entrepreneur, we're always looking to solve problems. And so I started to connect with agencies outside of the actual city itself and find these independent agencies that had group homes and had this pod structure set up to where they were bringing kids in and they were helping them and they were helping them find families. And then I'm talking to them and I'm realizing that all the support that they need, right? And all the support that the foster families need. And so for me, it has spiraled into this thing now where every year now we're helping a family get a roof, right? On Tuesday this week, we're actually donating a roof to a foster family. It's got 9 kids in it, right? Because we can sit there and focus on the kids and focus on the growth of these teenagers and giving them the opportunity. But there's so many resources that there's these stipends and these per diems that the city gives to the families that don't even support much more than maybe a couple meals. And like, they've got a heart that they're wanting to share and they want to help these kids out. And we're just not giving them, they're just not getting enough, man. They're not getting enough, man. And for me, that was one of those things where I had this burden on my heart where I'm like, I'm going to make a change in this. And with Foster the Future, it's not about us being the catalyst of it all. I'm trying to partner with agencies. It's not about me. It's about the kids. It's about the community. And so like our last event, we partnered with 2 or 3 different agencies. We raised about $15,000. We gave the agencies money to take the kids Christmas shopping, to give them the opportunity to buy gifts for other people. I brought a bunch of kids into the office. I let them shoot a podcast with me. I bought them all Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I coached them and we helped build out business plans for them. We got them swag, all of these things, because it only takes one time or one person to just spark something inside of somebody. And all of a sudden, you might know that might be the next president, right? You just don't know. And I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, especially as we become more successful, that we can't be focused on our business. We got to be focused on the community and being able to build what's going to be coming behind us, leave that legacy.
Michael, in a world where dog eats dog and it's all about the bottom line, it's all about dollars, it's all about profitability, it is wonderful to meet a person like yourself who is not only sharp and focused on building a business and building an effective, efficient, mean running team, but also as a side where he cares about truthfulness and honesty and helping others who don't have help. That not only speaks so much about who you are as a person, but also talks a lot about the vision that you have. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
What are some final words you have for our audience?
Man, I think that I would say one of the biggest things, man, and first off, appreciate the kind words, Mark. I really do, man. Something I'll leave you guys with is just sometimes it feels counterintuitive that the more you give, the more you get. But I can look back over my life and and you obviously have to fill your cup, right? You got to take care of you. And that leads us back to the beginning of the conversation, right? Filling your cup isn't being selfish, right? Filling your cup is being selfless, right? Doing the things that you've got to do to put you in that certainty mindset so that you're not operating out of scarcity. You want to be able to really help and impact people. You've got to be able to find your way to operate out of an abundant mindset. And so you've got to do those things. You've got to take care of yourself. But the more that you can help people and have presence and awareness in this world that's fast and constant inputs, right? You've got to be able to create clarity and space in these little moments to just slow down and say, at the end of the day, everybody wants love, man. Everybody, that's it. Wars start because of it. People take their lives because of it, man. And I think that the more that we could all operate out of just like selfless abundance and love, man, that can change a culture.
Love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I hope to talk to you soon again.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mark.